What's up, everyone, and welcome to Say It in Sports, the podcast where we break down life and leadership lessons through the lens of the games we love. I am Jen Crompton, and I am your host, and this week we are talking about something that everyone can relate to, whether you're on the field or in the office, and that is toxic teammates. So today I have a great guest. Her name is Jenn Azara, and Jen is with us. She is the managing editor of Sports Business Journal Tech. She is a sports fan. She is a leader. She has two beautiful, amazing children, and I actually met her through fitness. So Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I'd be remiss if I didn't start by saying that Jen Crompton here is probably one of the best teammates I've ever met. She not only roots for people, but she empowers them to succeed, and then she celebrates those successes. So I don't think there's anything more you could want in a teammate. I'm honored to be here and share this with you, and I wish you many, many more episodes.
Well, I very much appreciate that. And just to give you a shout, you actually pushed me to get this first episode recorded. So thank you so much.
Anytime.
All right. So I was so happy to have you as a guest because I know that you really do like sports. And, being from the Philadelphia area, we are almost required to like sports and to talk about sports. But also having that leadership experience and being a professional and being a woman in, an industry that is sometimes dominated by men, when it comes to sports and tech and all of that.
Yeah.
So I was excited to have you on so that way we could talk about these toxic teammates and what they really mean. Talking about it from both perspectives, from sports and talking about what we're observing as, toxic teammates in sports teams. Yep. And then also in work. I'm sure that you've encountered a few toxic teammates.
One or two. Yeah.
So just kind of talking about, what we see, what we've observed, and then ultimately being able to provide some advice on, how you can deal with some of those toxic teammates.
Sometimes it offers an opportunity, right? And you can end up with a stronger team for it. So yeah, I think it's something that everybody encounters at one point or another in their work life. And, the more tools you have to handle it, the better off you are. So
yeah, absolutely. And so, this idea really came to me when I was watching the Sixers. So yep. The 76ers, my son is a very big basketball fan, so he loves watching them. And we've been to a bunch of basketball games. I enjoy basketball because it's fast and it's fun. Mm-hmm. But, being a Sixers fan is a little bit tough, especially this year. Yes. And we haven't necessarily had the best of teammates. So, when I think about a toxic teammate, yep. And this is the struggle, right? So when I think about a toxic teammate and I think about the Sixers, the first person that comes to mind is Joel Embiid, right?
Yep.
Who is...
It'd be hard pressed to come up with someone else.
Yeah, and he's, a great player, someone who is so skilled, and really was like meant to play basketball.
Yeah.
But yesterday he missed his 400th game. He's been in the league since, 2014. So he was drafted third in the 2014 NBA draft, but he didn't play for the first 2 years because he had an injury. So he made it in 2016 with his debut. Right. So he's played in 446 games in those 10 and a half years, but missed 400 games. And over that time has accumulated $266 million to be a basketball player. Mm-hmm. So, I think the struggle, right, is a talented player, but one who doesn't put his full effort in. And injuries aside, I understand an athlete, you get an injury, right? You can't necessarily play. But there are other characteristics that I think really kind of put him in that toxic teammate category. Being late to practice and things like that. And then there's the other players on the team that I think really are impacted by it. And that's kind of I'm sure that's what you see in the workplace too, is you have one toxic player, yep. One toxic teammate, one toxic colleague, and then it kind of goes into the others, right?
Oh yeah. I think that's the biggest characteristic of a toxic teammate. In isolation, it's manageable. The real damage gets done as it kind of permeates throughout the team or the workforce. So really, And I think the point that you make, which is important, is you see it a lot of times with a real high performer, right? There's no denying Embiid's talent. He's a superstar when he's hitting and he's healthy. You know, he's something to watch and he brings a lot of success to the team. But at the same point in time, with a, 50% out rate and the other things that swirl around him. Just for fun, I suspected his name would come up, so I did a little Google News search of him yesterday, and when the page comes up, I mean, all it is speculation as to whether or not he'd play. Executives in the industry talking about how unhappy they are with the situation, how it's less than ideal. Not really one thing about the Sixers just as a team or their season or how it's going. He is a Sixer, obviously, but there's a large disconnect between him, the player, and the entire rest of that team and that organization. So it creates a lot of unnecessary focus shift. There are a whole bunch of other guys there who are putting in the work, and it's all getting overshadowed kind of by this. So I mean, it happens in the office, and the difficulty for an organization or a team is, this person does have the potential, and they can, really perform for you, generate revenue for you, bring in fans for you, but at what cost to everybody else. And so that's a leadership issue that they have to really consider and think about and decide, at what point is this doing us more harm than good? At what point, do we just say, maybe we cut ties and focus on everybody else?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a big part of it too, is, it's hard. Like you said, you use the word high performer, right? Which is such a great term to use, because you have some of these people who are high performers, but they almost get in their own way with their attitudes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like I had posted something on LinkedIn and asked people if they had examples. And someone posted about that they were part of a sales team. They were a leader on a sales team. Yeah. And they had another leader who was the top performer. So when we're thinking about it in terms of the professional world, that top performer brought in the most amount of money as, the top salesperson in the entire organization. Mm-hmm. The problem is he was a jerk, right? So it's like, if you're running the business or you're the leader on the team, how do you balance this great performer who's bringing in a ton of money, really contributing to the bottom line, but is a jerk and is now, hurting other people on the team? Yeah. So the part of the story that I thought was really interesting was they said that this guy had gone out on paternity leave and he was going to be out for at least 30 days, at least a month. Mm-hmm. And the team was a little bit concerned about it, thinking, how is this going to impact our bottom line? Yeah. So you would generally think, okay, well, if your top salesperson is not going to be in the office for 30 days, maybe this month is going to be down, right? And maybe that's even going to be down a little bit longer depending on this pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what actually happened was the opposite. Everyone else on the team stepped up because they knew they had to perform better, but they also didn't have that toxic person around.
They were out of the shadow, right? This was their chance, right? So there were probably a whole bunch of top performers in training who really just didn't have that opportunity to kind of prove themselves and what they could do with that existence of that other person on that team.
Yeah. And I think, with Embiid too, they're really looking at him as a leader, but, and again, you cannot knock his physical abilities when he is out there and he's doing his best. He's really playing awesome, but he just never really was a leader, in my opinion.
That's the thing. People equate someone who might be the best at their job and identify them as the leader, but they're two very different things and they require two very different skill sets, right? So you might be the absolute undisputed best basketball player. That doesn't make you the person to lead the team. I think an example of that, if we were to switch sports, is football, where the perception is always that the quarterback is the leader, right? The quarterback is the leader on the field, so the quarterback is the leader de facto on the team. And I think we saw that bucked with, say, a Jason Kelce, right? Who came out, big personality, obviously, loved that team, and was truly a leading force on there, but not in that kind of number one position. So I think when people get confused and assume that just because you're good at performing X function, you'd also be the correct person for that. That's a leadership issue that really needs to kind of be reevaluated in terms of how sound that is, because you could have somebody who's a middle performer or just somebody a little more, behind the scenes, who would be a much more effective leader and capable of gelling a team and setting an example for, healthy behaviors.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what happens, right? Somebody is splashy and big, and then they immediately kind of lock eyes on them and like, okay, you're the leader, you're the example. But not only may they not be great at that, they might not want that job, right?
Sure, yeah. And
so that's another thing. You put that on their shoulders.
Yep.
I didn't ask for this. I want to play ball. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
It's not my job to bring everybody along and rah-rah everybody on the bench. Some people aren't wired that way, and it's just not, not their interest. So,
well, and I used to always say that about Embiid is I don't think he wants to be the leader. And I think he was just thrown into that role, and he just he's just very focused on his skills, very focused on playing.
Yeah.
And, the counter to that from the 76ers would be Maxey, who I love.
Yeah.
And I just think he's such a great guy. And he brings this beautiful young energy to the team. And he's just he always seems to be happy. Mm-hmm. Maybe happy is not the right word. He brings joy. So even if they lose, he still doesn't call his teammates out and tell them that they played awful. He takes responsibility. He's accountable. He did make a statement about Embiid because he had enough of them. I think earlier in the season when he said, he's late. Embiid shows up late, and he can't do that because, Maxey on the other side, he leads by example, and that's what he'll say. He's like, I want to play good ball. I want to lead by example, and so he really is, in my opinion, he exemplifies that admired teammate, right? So the opposite of the toxic teammate. He's the admired teammate, the one who really can set the bar and set the tone and bring everyone with him, right?
Right. Well, because just as a toxic coworker will kind of spread that, somebody in the converse position who does bring that kind of positive energy and energizing presence, that lifts everybody else too. So, you can have the same amount of impact, but in a much more positive and productive way if you've got the right people in place there in the right positions. So
yeah, well, and I think one thing too that's interesting is when you're talking about athletes, they can be benched, they can be traded, they can be no longer on the team, right? But when we come to our professional lives, we can't always bench someone, right? They might have to still be on the team, and we might have to deal with them.
Yeah.
And whether we're a leader or, a colleague of theirs and we're on the same level, whatever it might be, we still have to deal with them in some way, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you actually gave me a really great example before about kind of switching roles. As you're a leader and you saw potential in someone and saw that they weren't necessarily performing to their full potential in a particular role, but you were able to help them find their way.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the reality is, people aren't as, pluck and pull as maybe in the sports industry in regular old corporate America. And so I had someone and our team culture, our meeting culture was kind of combative and there were just a lot of personalities that didn't seem to mix, and, for good or bad, this was kind of the mix that we had for the time being. But, everybody came out of those calls, you felt drained, it was very just kind of jostly, and nobody kind of clicked. And the one individual, he was kind of defensive, and the more I thought about it, this was a seasoned professional and, had a ton of experience and a great career, high performer, there you go. But I think was out of his element in the current role, which he had kind of, come into, not in a, straight line kind of way. And so rather than, we could continue to work at it and try to make, meetings a more civil and, respectful exchange and all of that. But there was a different position open that I thought might make more sense for this individual. And, we got it done and we made a switch and both sides are thriving. Absolutely the right position for this person, doing great, kicking butt. And the dynamics shifted elsewhere. I think he was in a position where he was frankly uncomfortable with where he was at. And, maybe didn't even recognize it, himself, that this wasn't right for him. And just being able to kind of step back, take a look at really what was going on underneath and find a better spot, helped the full team and helped him really thrive. So, yeah,
that's great.
It was a good one.
They're
not always so good, but that was a great one.
But it's great that you saw the potential and that you were like, you know what, you're good, just not this spot is the right spot for you, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Didn't undercut the talent at all. It just, it wasn't being maximized. And, as someone who was used to a lot of success as a high performer, I think they felt that, right? That it just didn't feel great and it wasn't gelling the way it should have. And then it was kind of spiraling from there. So I think there's chances. I mean, that was a series of circumstances where there was something open that made sense and everything. Can't always happen, but I do think that kind of looking deeper at, what might be behind it, I'm hesitant to think almost anyone is just kind of toxic by who they are. I think it's shaped by a lot of different circumstances and that. So if you can kind of dissect that and the person is, open to, some kind of change that, and you're showing that, you're looking out for their best interests, which, is what you're, as a leader, that's your job. So, I think you can make it work. And I think that everyone can be the better for it. So, yeah.
Well, and something that you said there was, finding the why, right? Like, why are you acting in this way? Why are you not caring about your teammates? Why are you not contributing to your team the way you should be?
Yeah.
Because it's likely that, you said with this particular situation, that person was a little bit in over their head. So they might not really have been able to handle the situation. And you also mentioned that they might not have even noticed it, right? So it's very interesting to think like, well, what is behind it? Why are you acting this way? What is going on? Is there something I can do to help you to, get over that? Or are you just not in the right place, right?
Yeah. I mean,
because sometimes that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, that happens too. No, it happens too. And I think every leader has to really come to that kind of point in the road where you say, like, is the damage to everybody else on my team who I'm just as equally responsible for, or a case where, some kind of policy is stepped out of where you can't really say like, all right, I can overlook this because, you're such a great contributor to the team in terms of results that, the ripple effect that would have and the precedent that would set would be so damaging that you would lose all credibility as a leader too now, right? Because you're not, your job is to kind of keep things, running in order. So, I pulled some stats because I saw that because I do think people get to that point and they're nervous about it and they don't know how to make the decision. But Career Builder a little while ago, and they're a great resource. I used to use them all the time with my CFOs. They said losing a good hire due to a toxic teammate actually costs an employer twice as much as firing the toxic employee would.
Oh my gosh.
So, anyone who says, similar to the sales example, right? Well, we're going to lose money, whatever. And, we can't afford the hit that we would incur from removing this individual from the team. It actually, you come out ahead.
Yeah, so maybe it's like a little bit of temporary pain for that long-term,
absolutely,
relief and thriving, like in the long term.
And I think there's something, and it happens a lot with athletes too, that when you have a toxic person, they develop this kind of myth about them that they're irreplaceable, right?
Sure.
My skill set, what I'm contributing to the team, the points I put up, whatever it is, you're not going to get that from somebody else. And similarly, I know other leaders, other managers who have had people and they've said, I know he's just a plague to this office, but he knows stuff nobody else knows. And he who else is going to do that? And we'll be left scrambling. And, sooner or later they figure out that, not only could you probably find somebody who could do it, maybe they're not at the exact same skill set or with the exact same experience level. They might be more eager. They might be willing to learn it faster. They might bring a different experience or energy that not traditionally you thought about in terms of that role because that role had been held by someone for so long that's the only way you pictured that job, right? It was X, Jim sat there, Jim did the job this way, and without Jim, we'd be lost. But, Maria comes in and, she might come in and find 9 different efficiencies that she can bring from wherever her previous experience was. And, after a month or two of getting the lay of the land is doing it better than ever. So, I think athletes, create that culture too, right? Who's going to do this for you. And, a coach or an organization might be hesitant to, hit that trade button or start those talks because, they are held to the results, right? The coach's job is on the line too. You have a bad season, Black Monday comes pretty fast, and those calls get made. So,
those players are getting paid so much that they need to be like, in the summer, Taiwan Walker for the Phillies. So he's a pitcher, and he wasn't doing a great job, and they had to play him. He had to get out there.
Right.
And Rob Thompson did the best he could to figure out where to fit him in the lineup, so that way Walker could get out there and do something, right? And then, but not necessarily hurt the team. And, the Phillies organization, again, I know we're from Philly, so we talk about all of our Philly sports, but the Phillies organization is one that I wasn't even going to touch on today, but is so near and dear to my heart because I've grown up watching the Phillies, but because I just love their vibe.
Yeah.
The way they look out for each other, the fact that they seem like they're buddies on the field, like they actually care about each other, like they're friends. And they really do give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think the way that Rob Thompson has managed the team, he doesn't necessarily just pull pitchers out. Like Ranger Suarez was struggling a little bit this summer, but Rob wasn't like, you know what, you're out, Ranger. Like, he gave him a heads up. He told him what he was going to do. He laid his plan out and said, I want you to be successful.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. That's the key to getting some buy-in too, right? If you're just kind of making these moves behind the scenes and taking full charge of it, you involve the person in the decision making. You're transparent in terms of, what your action plan is. And I think you have a better chance of success and buy-in from even I'm not saying he was a difficult personality, but even from a difficult personality, right? Because there's some co-control in the situation. And I think that goes a long way because a lot of times with a toxic personality, there's a lot of ego involved, right? And that adds a whole other component in how you approach people and how you kind of manage those situations. So no, kudos to him for sure. It's a smart way to manage.
Well, and I think too, like you mentioned, kind of like in the toxic teammate part of this, right? So you can be toxic from an attitudinal perspective, or you can be toxic from a performance perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, I would say that it's more the attitude that would make a bigger impact than performance. Yeah. Although I guess there would be some situations where the performance, if you're not performing up to your ability, you almost become a toxic teammate.
Yeah, I think that's black and white, though. It's easier to make a call about that, right? Somebody's not living up, your job responsibilities are X, Y, and Z. And if you're not making that cut, I think those decisions on the managers, whether, it's time to say goodbye, is easier than someone who is, not collegial or disrespectful in meetings or, those, it's tougher to kind of draw a line and say, we've got to go. But they did, that same Career Builder study said that, what was the stat? The 54% of good employees are 54% more likely to start looking for a new job if they're just on the presence of a team with a toxic coworker.
Okay.
So
So more than half.
right, and you're risking your good people, right? There are other good people. There's more than one good person on a team. You're a manager, you're a leader, you're a hiring person. You're hopefully. You've got a pretty solid team across the board. So, risking having some of those people head out the door because you're not willing to act, whether it's, actually removing them or simply having a conversation and say, this can't continue. We can't have this kind of dynamic going in this workplace. It's counterproductive and it's impacting everybody else. And, you may or may not realize it, give that out.
Well, that kind of leads to a question I was going to ask, because you definitely have more of the management experience than I do from managing a team and individuals. If you do notice that there's some toxicity within your team and maybe you are able to pinpoint who that is, what are the steps that you generally would take to kind of find out if, this person is worth keeping, or maybe you're transitioning them into a different role, or if maybe they just have to go? Like, what kind of process do you go through?
Yeah, I think it depends person to person. I think there's one thing where I can kind of witness it and see it, but, I try to keep a real open door policy, and, I'll have other members of the team just say to me, like, oh, we'll come out of a meeting and they'll be like, what was that even, right? And so, when I see that it's already gotten to the point where other members of my team are saying something, I mean, obviously then there's no more, you can't, push hold on this any longer, and you really have to do something. I mean, I think it does. I think it goes to, you kind of look at it holistically, and you think about, one, the value that this individual brings to the organization. You have to weigh it against kind of the feedback you're getting from other people. But you really have to think about long-term what that does for your culture, whether it's the culture of your individual team or department, or the culture kind of for your whole company, and kind of what you're willing to allow is what's going to be accepted, right? And so that's kind of what I live by, right? That's it. You set that tone, and if you position yourself as someone who is willing to look the other way, and or have a culture where other people might feel disrespected or unheard, or that the same rules don't apply to everyone, you're going to have more than one toxic employee on your hands pretty fast, right? That spreads by example, just like, the good leadership spreads by example. And so if you have somebody, you're going to see that, and you're going to feel it pretty fast, especially if you have hired a team of people who are working hard and trying hard and doing well. They don't want to see, that effort go to waste, or be considered less than, or be overshadowed by nonsense and, peripheral chatter that's, counterproductive or not work related. I mean, you also have to think about, something I see a lot, there's be an uptick in it, is like, all right, somebody's probably on their way out already anyway, of their own doing.
They're like quiet quitting.
Yes. So, the quiet quit is real. Maybe they're already interviewing, maybe they've already secured something and just haven't given their notice yet, right?
Yeah.
There's like an instantaneous shift. Even someone who appeared pretty content, suddenly a lot of negative chatter, right? Because everything they were thinking that motivated them to start their look, that's being spread elsewhere. So, that's a red flag right away, where, when you see it happen kind of pretty radically, someone who all along had seemed fine and was doing well, but, now a lot of griping, and, a lot, oh, this company, this, right? Oh, this is not the best place. And that's, a kind of a surefire sign. I mean, then realistically, you're probably in a short-term window, because they're 1 foot on the way out the door. And so
take that other foot,
that'll be okay. But, that's something else you've got to watch, because the people who leave, people, you're friends with your work people. And so, they might be out and working somewhere else, but the ability, and I've seen that too, where they can kind of, come back to visit, or, have lunch with some old coworkers, and that, kind of negative, they're on the other side now. And so they're bringing kind of, it's the airing of the grievances of, everything, and that'll rile other people and get people, focusing on, some more. No workplace is perfect. No team is perfect, right? But, and you can work to make it as, productive and healthy an environment as you can. But when you have someone who just wants to fixate on those negative components, it can rile people up. It can rile people who were not unhappy at all up, because, people who have chosen to focus on the majority of my day goes well, and I'm supported, and whatever. But, what about that time that one guy doesn't listen? And, we harp on that enough, and we talk about that enough, and now you have a whole bunch of people. So
you have all this groupthink going on of like bad things that you're like, no, this wasn't even how this was supposed to go.
Yeah. I mean, it gets out of hand pretty fast, and being able to kind of rein that back in is not always the easiest. So, I mean, I think it depends on how vocal the person is. I think it depends on how far out of bounds somebody's stepping. And, I think if you look at all of that, whether or not you think that person is, salvageable in terms of like, a better fit somewhere, try to talk to them one-on-one.
Like, do you think their attitude might change, right? Like, there's something you might be able to do if you can get to the bottom of it and figure out
what that
is. There some kind of frustration that they're having with something in the workplace dynamic that's fixable? It might, it might be something that's correctable. They might not, see a clear career path, right? Or so it's a sports person who, is the second string on something, and like doesn't necessarily see they're going to get enough playing time. They're going to get enough whatever. Like, then, well, there's nowhere for me to go here. And so now I start to
them, it's
feel
mostly
resentful.
Or for them, it's mostly money. I'm not getting paid enough. And you're like, what? You mean 200 million is not enough money? It's weird. I thought that was great.
You didn't make that last year?
Right? So just to talk about the flip side for a minute too, because again, we're Philly fans. We are passionate. We love our people. They love us. They love each other sometimes or whatever. For the most part, that's how we act, right?
Yeah.
So we were just talking, and since we're on this Super Bowl high right now, we'll go to our most favorite example right now, which is Mr. Saquon Barkley, who has brought the spark and the energy to our team that we all can just latch onto and enjoy, right?
Yeah.
And we were just talking about, the game the other day. Will Shipley got his first career touchdown, and I was just reading something about, because I didn't notice this when I was watching. So Saquon wasn't on the field at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
He put his helmet on, and someone pointed out, they were like, oh, I thought he was going to go into the game. Well, he put his helmet on to go run out there to go congratulate Shipley on his touchdown. And you had to have a helmet on when you were on the field.
Yeah.
So he put his helmet on to run out there to hug him, and just watching Saquon on the sideline being so excited for Will and everything he was doing, and just the team in general. I mean, he's just
I mean, that's the thing. That game, beyond the terrific win for Philadelphia, it was like a masterclass in teamwork. There were so many examples throughout that. I mean, the Shipley alone, when that kid took that ball right to the end zone and they got him. It could have ended there. That was a phenomenal play. That would have been enough for him to hang his hat on and feel fantastic about playing in the NFC Championship and performing like that. But to give it right back to him, to let him run that into the end zone, we were ahead by a healthy amount. He could have missed it. It wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. Yeah. But, they lobbed that up for him so he would have that experience. And, it's just, they've got a bunch of rookie year guys in here who are having an unparalleled and beyond what they could have ever imagined experience. But a lot of that is coming from the generosity of the teammates, which is happening there. And, Philly sports fans at times get a bum rap for, being a little cranky and, but watch that Eagles team and how they interact with each other and how they support each other. And there was another clip when Saquon had that great run right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. He had only gotten about 20 yards down when they cut to Hurts and he was signaling touchdown. Like they knew it. They knew it, and he was cheering them on. And, it was just, or to even go back one more game, to go back to Saquon, when he had a chance to run another one and he stopped. Like we had enough of a lead. He didn't want to risk getting hurt. He didn't need to showboat. He said, we don't need the points. He said, I'll do it next game. Yeah. And he sure as heck did, right? Yeah, but, that's thinking about the team. Because he could have, blown it out again. The whole place, the link could have erupted again. But the fact that he could have, in that snow game, gotten hurt, something that sidelined him, that you wouldn't have seen him the rest of it. He put his own ego in that moment, not important, brushed it off, right? Said next game. And look, there was the next game. And,
Well, and I think,
Well, and I think that's such an important thing too when we're talking about these admired leaders and these teammates who really lift each other up, which is the selfishness, right? So they are selfless. Yeah. So they are giving everyone else the opportunity and the support. And I think that is what's so important is, as soon as you start pointing fingers at other players, that's never a good thing. Yeah. But the fact that, Hurts always has positive things to say about his players. Mm-hmm. And the media isn't always the nicest to Hurts, which I kind of hate, but that's aside. Yeah. But there was a play too where Saquon and Hurts looked at each other and Saquon said, I got this, right? And the trust between those players, the support between those players, I think that's really what defines this team. And it's been great to watch the evolution. They struggled a little, and Sirianni, I think, struggled a little, but they came back, they picked it up. And, you mentioned earlier Kelce, and he for sure, I think, was a foundational member of this team right now that has set that tone to be positive, to be supportive, and to leave it all out there on the field, but to think of the team first.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're a case where the collective goal of kind of getting to the end and winning it all trumps any individual, personal goals that each player might have, right? The kind of eyes on the prize, we're all in this for this as a unifying force, which can again happen in the workplace, right? Whatever your kind of team goals, mission is, if everybody is legitimately committed to that and doing what it takes while working with each other to get there, that's when you're hitting that winning stride, which is, where the Eagles are at this point in time. So.
Yeah. And you said the key word, I think, which is everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. All ships rise with the tide, but everyone has to be willing to put in the work and to be supportive of each other. Because once you have that one toxic teammate, like you said, it gets to the rest of the organization, and then you end up, not being on the right trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for today, and thanks for chatting with me about this. I think this is great. I think it's important to learn how to work with toxic teammates, how to not be a toxic teammate, and also, pointing out those great things about the admired teammates, the people who really do lift everyone else up and help everyone as a whole. They're supportive, and I think that's going to help us, and by us, I mean the Eagles, in the long run, and we're going to win the Super Bowl. So go Birds, right?
Birds.
All right. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. Make sure you follow us, and we will be bringing you more information, talking about life and leadership through the lens of the games that we love.